Hey guys, Darren Carr here, Coach of Wise Ocean Pods, and welcome back to the round 20 round review. This will be the first video of the modified version of this series, where we will strictly just now be looking at the games round by round, game by game, and going through all the popular players that we want to be discussing and who you should be trading in and out for this round. Obviously, we've only got 4 weeks left to go, so it's becoming a little bit easier now. Obviously, you're looking very short term rather than previously we're looking long term. So you're now got the flexibility of just targeting those 1 week plays, if not target a little bit longer, but definitely opens up the possibilities where you just want to target 1 week matchups now. So let's sort of get into it, I guess. So obviously had the 4-9 games this week. A lot of different fantasy scores out there, but yeah, we'll go through line by line. So starting with Carlton, obviously lost this game to Port Adelaide in a bit of an upset, but wasn't a huge amount of fantasy scores in this. Obviously, I said this in the captain video. I don't think many were going to be huge ceiling scores, just given that both of these matchups are quite difficult. So that sort of played out to be true. We did see Charlie Curnow have a nice 113 after kicking 3 goals. So I really like him as an option, honestly. He's got quite a few good matchups to come against easy opponents. So definitely could kick a few bags and could put up some decent ceiling scores. Probably not going to get. I don't think we've seen a huge ceiling from him so far this season. I don't think he's kicked many bags throughout the season. So it would be nice to see him, kick 7 or 8 at one point in the season. We also got to think that the Coleman is starting to heat up a little bit. I think he's got the lead by a fair margin at the moment, like maybe 6 or 7 goals. I might even pull that up while we're talking here. He's got 3 goals on top of Jesse Hogan, so definitely still in the fight. So maybe they start to feed him a little bit more. The other thing we've got to mention here is that Harry Mackay was out in this game, so that maybe helped him get those extra marks and kick a few more goals than what he maybe would have if Kerner was there. So something to consider. But I do really like him as an option. He's got Hawks this week. No, he's got who does he have this week actually? He got Collingwood, so really good matchup there. Then he's got Hawks the week after that. West Coast, so that should be a really juicy on round 23, and then finishes off with the if I can find it, St Kilda as well. So really good matchups to come. Probably 3 out of the 4 should be pretty comfortable wins. Maybe not quite over Hawthorn, but definitely those last 2 should be very comfortable and could definitely put up some big ceiling scores. So really like Kerner there as a forward if you're really struggling to find that extra option. But I think away from sort of the main 4, you got Sinkham there and you've got Dylan Moore that should be pretty confident in grabbing if you can't. Moving on, a more common, more fantasy relevant player, I guess, in Nick Newman. I think only scored their 100, which is not too bad in a tough matchup. And I really like him this week. I did speak about him a little bit last week. Comes into this really good fixture for the remainder of the season now. Well, actually, the best for any defender. So it goes against Collingwood this week, then a Hawthorn, then West Coast and St Kilda. So really good run there, and I highly recommend picking him up. I think you could hit that ceiling. So if you can pick them up, that would be definitely ideal. I'll get rid of that tab because we're not looking at that. Yeah, did a bit of everything in this game. 20 disposals is a bit lower than what we would have expected, but hit the all-star lines where he hit 6 marks and 8 tackles. Had a few unfortunate free kicks against. Did hit a very big quarter. I think he had like 57 in the third quarter or something like that, and sort of just plodded along for the rest of it. So it shows he can, if he can have a few more consistent quarters where it just opens up for him, he could be an absolute monster. So I definitely feels like that's going to happen sooner rather than later. He will probably hit a big ceiling game to finish off the season. So I would say jump on board. We've got a lot of these failing defenders at the moment where you're talking Hayden Young, Luke Ryan, even a Jordan Clark. You got Nick Martin back there as well. That can possibly go. My team specifically, I have what's his name, Trent Rivers. You could even look to jump off a Dacos with a lot of the tags coming his way. I wouldn't jump off Sheezer with that run for him. He's not copying any attention. So we've got a lot of those, defenders at the moment that a lot of that are highly popular. That I'd highly recommend jumping off at least one of them. That maybe is got a tougher run. That jumping on Nick Newman, who is a fairly bit lower owned and can definitely put up those ceiling scores, would be a wise move. Moving on from that though, we got Sam Walsh. Bit disappointing in the end. He was on 70 point. I think he was on like 73 or something like that at the half. So I thought he was on for an absolute monster and was a bit unforeseen. I didn't really expect that, and then got absolutely clamped in the second half where he just did nothing really. Didn't even finish on a ton, so that's really disappointing. And that continues his ton run, where I think he hasn't gone over a ton for the last 5 or 6 weeks. So that's really disappointing from him. And probably maybe would have been the right move to trade him out, even though I think his runs actually opens up for now. So I wouldn't be doing it this week for sure because his run does open up a fair bit. He's got Collingwood this week, Hawthorn the week after. It's a tough matchup. Then finish off with 2 nice ones. So I'm just in the book of holding him, I think. But yeah, really disappointing from that. Besides that, we had Elijah Hewitt. If anyone that picked him up as a forward, he's putting up some decent numbers with an 80-ish. So you'd be okay there. Kennelly a bit lower than that with the 73 if you have him. Yeah, nothing really more to report on those guys there. Just quietly, Carroll's getting quite cheap for what he is. Maybe could be a decent one to pick up for next year if he can cement his spot in the best 22. He's, I think, below 300k at the moment. So, yeah, and it has forward status too. But I don't know, that's going to stick around next year. Have to wait and see. But on to Port Adelaide, no one really too fantasy relevant up top there with Drew, Wines, and Horns Francis going all about that 100, if not 110. Butters is the next best with 23 disposals, 5 marks, and 5 tackles. 92 disposals, oh, not 92 disposals, 92 fantasy points. Again, another poor game. Bit of attention in this one. We saw Chin Cotter go to him for majority of the game, but he also did a fair bit of a job on Rosie as well when Butters was resting forward or on the bench as such. He just played an absolute monster of a game, had a lot of time on ground, and just did not let up, and it really threw both of the 2 Port boys there off the game, and both resulted in quite subpar games for them, even though they won that game against Carlton. So one, we just got a cop on the chin, I think. We always sort of knew it was going to be a tough matchup, especially the Blues at the MCG. I think it was MCG or maybe it was Marvel. So one of the two. So yeah, got a couple on the chin. Hopefully you did avoid it if you didn't have one of them. Yeah, I probably wouldn't be trading out any of them. I think their run's not too bad. I think they can bounce back quite quickly. Sydney this week, which is maybe the tough one at the moment, especially maybe a possible tag with, you got Adam Treloar, not Adam Treloar, Taylor Adams. I get them confused all the time. He does a bit of a role. James Jordan's there as well, even a row bottom. So both of them could cop a decent tag, or if not, one of them will probably be heavily clamped. So trying to pick which one it will be. I think we're more linked to Butters at this point in time, so you probably could jump off him. Does have Neil Bull in the wake after as well, which isn't any guarantee that it may be a tag, but definitely could be a flag. So don't mind jumping off either of those boys. I don't think they're part of the top, 8 for the remainder of the season. So yeah, definitely could jump off those guys. Besides that, we had the likes of Logan Evans, which I think a lot of people were relying on the Friday night to put up a decent score to really determine the trades. Really failed. I think he was tracking decently in the first half. I think he was on 40 or so points and just really struggled in the final term. I don't know really what changed. Just, yeah, unfortunately, just the way footy worked out, he just didn't put up a decent score for us and really ultimately changed my trades of what I was doing. Would have been nice to be able to slot him in there and trade a few other players out. So he had a 6 points third quarter and 11-point fourth quarter. So yeah, only 17 points to finish off the game, which is a little bit disappointing. So I don't think the role changed as such. I think it was just a pretty tight and contested game. Was pretty slow all throughout. So yeah, bit disappointing there. And probably is one you could trade out now. He's at over 500k. And yeah, probably time you can cash him out. I don't think he's providing too much on the bench for us anymore. So I don't think Port have any early games. They play on the Saturday night this week, and Saturday night next week as well. So the week after that, and then yeah. So I don't think he's providing anything, unfortunately. You can't loop him anymore, so it's probably time to just cash him out while you can. Moving on to the first Saturday game, we've got North and Geelong. So Geelong beat them by 40 points. We saw Cherry, the player I brought in this week, go 156 and was the highest scoring player of the round. Absolutely smacked this game, and I think he beat his season best by 30 odd points quite comfortably in this one. So 25 disposals, 5 marks, 8 tackles, and 54 hitouts is a massive. One of the best games I've seen a Rockman play in a fair while. Honestly, he's put in the same conversation as your Gawns and your Marshalls now. Honestly, he just looks like a fantasy pig with it in the ruck, and probably one that will be, sizzling over for the next sort of 10 years. I think he is just absolutely killing it at the moment, and has had a wonderful season. And still continues to have a good run home, so he could definitely put up a few more ceiling scores to finish off. Was lucky enough to have him as my VC as well. I think a lot of people did that a fair bit. I think it was about 10% of the competition did him as VC in the top 1,000 or something like that. So yeah, but he was far and beyond the best player of the round. I think the next best was 139, which was a Zorko. So yeah, he was absolutely flying. Tom Power was the sort of, I guess, the talk of the town on this game, where a lot of people were still trading him out this round, just because he had been underperforming and he had to go. But I guess a lot of people didn't sort of foresee him going into that back half and taking the kick-ins with the likes of Fisher and Sheasel out. I did sort of have a thought in my mind that it was going to be a possibility, knowing that he was playing a bit of that half-back role in the previous weeks, being moved out of midfield a bit, but I didn't know the full extent that he'd be taking kickouts and been really taking that role, and obviously there's a lot of points there for him, but yeah, definitely one I'm probably not looking at trading in. I think depending on the likelihood of Fisher and McKercher, how far away they are in terms of the injury, I think that pretty much falls straight back. So maybe a bit of a watch in terms of the match, the injury report, but I'm definitely not looking at him at this stage. It would be the season to bring him back in, because we've done that with so many of these other forwards. You're talking Sexton, you're talking Fisher. He'd just be another one to add to the list, but yeah, I don't think I could do it at this stage. Sheasel did pretty well. Probably failed a little bit, as a lot of people's VC, with a 36 disposals, 3 marks, and 1 tackle. Kicked a nice goal as well with a 118. Just not quite big enough, especially with alongside Cherry there. So I think it probably left a little bit of a sour taste in a lot of people's mouth that went with that option, with a lot of coaches putting Sheasel above Cherry in their captains. Similar to me, Sheasel was 1 and Cherry number 2, so yeah, no surprising there that a lot of people would have done that. I was lucky enough I didn't have Sheasel, so I went with Cherry, and that worked out. Luke Davis-Uniacke, for anyone that sort of traded him in, looking at the good run, put up a 98, which is pretty disappointing. I think his time's done, unfortunately. I don't think he's shown that much of a ceiling now. I think he's getting a lot of these ball taken by the likes of Sheasel and a few others around him, like a Simpkin and the like. So I don't think he's fantasy relevant as such anymore, and I guess maybe it'll be a bit of a different conversation next year, where we've been speaking about him a fair bit for the last maybe 3 or 4 years, thinking he's going to be this breaking out player, but I don't think he'll be in much conversations next year. Simpkin put up a nice 92 as an F6 option. Would have been pretty pleasing, and shown that he can do this probably for the next 2 or 3 weeks in the nicer matchups. Didn't do anything amazing. Kicked the first goal, which was good to see. Kicked him off well and just kept tracking decently. Probably would have been nice to hit the ton, but a 92, you're taking that for sure. And I think he was one of the better F6 options for the round. I think only maybe maybe 1 or 2 beat him in that field. But besides that, we saw Jaden Stevenson. He took a few kick-ins as well, being that half-backer with the likes of Fisher and McKercher out. So again, probably just watching to see what's happening there. I don't think you're trading him in, unfortunately, even though he is a fair bit cheaper. I'll get that price up for us, actually, while I'm here. He is fairly cheap, I thought. 465k. So as a forward option, could definitely take a punt if you're keen on it, or if the other two are out long enough, he definitely could provide some decent scores there. But it did seem like they preferred to take Powell instead of him. So yeah, probably one I wouldn't look to jump on. But besides that, no one else really mentioned from them. Phillips did come back in, but he didn't play a huge amount of CBA role. I think it was mainly, the main boys in there. I'll probably even just bring that up just for you guys. Go to North. So we saw. So LDU was still number one CBA taker there. Wardlaw was 50%. Phillips was 50%. Simpkin was 62, the second behind Wardlaw. Not Wardlaw. Luke Davies-Uniacke, and then Sheasel was also at 52%. So they're really spreading the midfield quite, thin, spending 50-50, besides the one mainstay in Luke Davies-Uniacke. So, yeah, which is really weird. You'd think having the most CBAs, he'd score the most, but there's definitely not the way it's working at this point in time. Alrighty, we'll move on to Geelong, where we saw Tom Stewart back up his big scores again with another 21, 22. He's just super consistent at this point in time. 32 disposals, 9 marks, 1 tackle. Probably could have been a lot bigger because he normally does tackle a little bit harder than that. Just didn't really do much in this game, unfortunately. Took plenty of marks, just not many tackles, unfortunately. And definitely probably needs to be one we need to talk about in terms of a captain option now. He's put up 6 or 5 big tons. So yeah, 5 weeks of straight tons, and 3 of those have been 120 pluses. So definitely could be a pretty decent option. Who does he have coming up? He's got Adelaide, Fremantle, St Kilda, and Eagles. So really good run. I think definitely could provide some big ceiling scores and something we need to consider on the run home. If you don't have him, I'd still highly recommend him. He is just absolutely killing it in the midfield at the minute. Besides that, you got Charlie Cameron, who could be a bit of a forward option if you want to go a little bit left field. His, again, like that run said, Adelaide, St Kilda, and West Coast particularly could definitely put up a lot of goals. So if he can kick a bag, he could definitely provide some huge sitting scores, and I could definitely see him kicking a 150 at some point to finish off the season. I'm particularly looking at him to finish off against West Coast on that round 28, round 24. A few besides that, we've had Graham Myers put up a nice 98. He was probably one of the better F6 options for this round. Very up and down he's going to be. Didn't hit the scoreboard, which was a little bit disappointing. I would have thought he would have, but was able to get the score in other ways with 21 disposals, 7 marks, and 7 tackles. So, yeah, just did everything he could in that game. So, you'd be happy there. Holmes, again, another little downer one with a 94. Not doing a huge amount wrong. Kicked a nice goal, just not getting a huge amount of disposal at this point in time. Was a tough matchup though, so he copped it on the chin. Dempsey bounced back after a poor game last week, but I don't think you're looking at him. If you had him, you could probably maybe just hold him, but I probably wouldn't. Humphreys put up a nice 73 if you needed him on field. Maybe some people looked him on with just a few other maybe tag concerns going on, but I personally wouldn't. He could even be a one you could trade as well, just with I don't know. I don't think you're looping him too often at the moment, but it could definitely provide some decent score. It does have St Kilda coming up, so it could definitely provide a decent score there. Was on track for a big one, just slowed down in the second half, unfortunately. To finish off this game, we had Manor as well. Put up a 63, which is a little bit of an annoying score. He did kick 2 very late goals to make it considerable if you really wanted to take it in that looping option. But at the end of the day, I personally didn't, just thinking that Dowling would go a bit better, and luckily he did. So, it was a little bit frustrating trading him in, only to get a 63 and not even use him. But besides that, we also saw Sam De Koning not ruck at all in this game, so maybe a bit of a watch for the remainder of the season if that's going to be something that we look at next year for sure. Move on to the next game. Alright. I've Gold Coast and Brisbane. Gold Coast pretty straightforward. Flanders did his thing with 113. 33 disposals, 4 marks, 3 tackles. Kicked a nice goal as well, but nothing amazing. Anderson's one I really like. I like the look of for the remainder of the season. I think I've showed this last week with his inside mid role. Easily the best at 6 average point. Sorry, I don't really know how to say it. It's just 6 average, so really nice. He goes West Coast this week, so instant reward. Essendon, Melbourne, and Richmond. So all of those are green to finish off the season. He's down at 871k, I believe. So definitely a lower price. Isn't coming in the most best form. Like if I read out some of his scores, I think his last 2 have been below 100, if not below 80. It's not the greatest in terms of that, but I think the matchups have been really tough for him. So, yeah, he came off an 85 last week and came off a 78 the week prior. One against GWS, one against Brisbane Lions. So, really 2 tough matchups. Even before that, he went against Port Adelaide and North, who put up a 103 and a 112. So, I definitely see a few ceiling games for him to finish off this season. So, I really do like him as an option if you're wanting to be a bit more unique and a bit more risky, I guess, because he can be very up and down. I just think with the matchups being the way that they have been, that he can provide some very nice scores for us. But besides that, I don't think we're really looking at anyone else from the Suns at all. They're just a bit of a rebel case at the moment and not making finals now, which is a bit of a shame for those that really thought they were going to make it, myself included. I thought Hardwick was going to get him there, but no, not to be seen. Besides that, we had Brisbane, who are just absolutely on a tear. Informed team of competition. But in terms of fantasy, Zorko killed it with a 139. This matchup against the Suns, it's just so juicy for halfback defenders, and something that I guess we need to start targeting for the remainder of the season, because it is just getting sort of ridiculous. Who do they have to finish off? So they got West Coast. They're not really looking at anyone there. Maybe if you have Duggan, you could look at that, but I think he's fairly unique. Essendon the week next, so maybe you can look at a Nick Martin if you want to still hold him by then. Besides that, then you got Melbourne and Richmond. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like we've really got anyone that's really playing against them to finish off the season besides Nick Martin. So bit of one that's going to go to waste for the remainder of the season, unfortunately. But it was good while it lasted. We had a few like a Lockie for Whitfield and Dane Zorko go well. Besides that, the 2 midfielders in Lockie Neal and Josh Dunkley got it done with 129 and 128 respectively. Both kicked a nice goal. Both had 30 plus disposals, 7 marks, and a couple tackles there. Josh Dunkley particularly got it done late. I think he was on like what was it, maybe 81 at 3/4 time, and had a nice big 4th quarter to get that nice big score. Even kicked a very late goal, I think just before the siren sounded. So yeah, would have been nice as an owner there. He's been killing it, and like I said, I did expect him to bounce back quite heavily. He did feature in my my captain, so which was nice. Just quietly, I don't know how well my captains went, but I think it went pretty well. Yeah, I only had, surprisingly, Tom Green was my worst one at number 3 at 105. Yeah, just looking at here, went fairly well. But besides that, back on to Brisbane. Really, no one else to really mention. I would have thought. Yeah. Move on. St Kilda and Essendon, the upset of the round. St Kilda got it done by a massive 53 points to Essendon. So Marshall was a standout here, 135, absolutely killed it. In a tougher matchup, he just got it done. He just did not care. And yeah, maybe is one that you want to look to trade in if you don't have him. He's going to have an awesome run to finish off the season, which we already know. This week, he does have a tougher one against Oscar McInerney, is that right? The Brisbane rock line. Yeah, so tough one there, but then finished off with 3 very nice ones. So good one, you could jump early. I don't think he's going to struggle too much this week anyway. Probably not going to get much cheaper than what he is, where he's over $1 million anyway. So you're really paying up top dollar now, but I think you're going to get that extra point off of Tim English, who is struggling quietly and has a tougher run. Who has one of the tougher runs, Melbourne this week against Max, Adelaide, and then Cherry as well. So yeah, I'd look to jump off English if you can, if you've got the flexibility. Just go straight to Marshall. Wangani Milera, didn't see any CBAs this week, so again, probably just a bit of a watch and wait. I don't think he's one you're really targeting. I don't think he's hit those big scores for us yet this season, so one I'm not really looking at, unfortunately. Still put up a nice 112, but that was sort of soured a little bit by kicking 3 goals. If you thought he kicked 3 goals, you'd think it was going to be a much bigger game, but at the end of the day, I'm happy with 112 after trading him in last week. Sinclair, for those that have him, 104. Had a little bit of CBAs this week. 28 disposals, 9 marks, and 1 tackle, but nothing amazing. I would have thought his run, again, looks pretty decent to finish off the season, so could be a bit of a unique one for you. I think he's down at 13% owned, so definitely don't mind that. Again, they are against Brisbane this week, who are a bit of a tough matchup, so maybe not one you'd want to target this week particularly. Same with Steele. Really just trying to target those 1 week matchups at the moment and trying to get the bang for your buck and try and get those ceiling scores. Besides that, we saw Hugh Garcia, who didn't actually play. I think did he score a 0? Did he not play? No, he didn't play. 0% time game. So very unusual. They didn't use their sub at all. But I guess when you're winning by 50 points, why would you need to? On to Essendon, the Rabble, the basket case. Desmond was the top scorer of 114. Probably nothing to really be said there. He's a good fantasy player on his day, but just plays that wing role, so he's super volatile and someone I probably couldn't get a hold on. Zach Merritt, he was on track for a monster. I think he was on like 72 or something like that at the half, and just got absolutely shut down in the second half, and didn't even make it to 100, just like a lot of my players, unfortunately. So really disappointing there. And what's that run like? Is there a possibility you trade him out? No, probably not. Maybe the last 2 games you'd possibly look at it with Sydney and Brisbane, but I think these next 2 you just hold through Fremantle and Geelong and Gold Coast there. So no concerns there for me. Just not getting quite enough of those ceiling scores, which is a bit frustrating. Nick Martin, again, very disappointing, and one I'd probably look to jump off if you can. His scores have been all well below 100 in the last sort of 6 weeks or so. I think he only had that one big flash of the pan where he kicked 4 goals and had like a 143. But besides that, it's all been sort of between 80 and 100, and really been nowhere near the top line. So look to trade him out if you have the flexibility. Personally, I don't, but I definitely would recommend it. However, no, never mind. Take that back. All right. Moving on, Shields. If anyone still picked him up a couple weeks ago, 78, you'd be a little bit disappointed with that, but not too bad. Kicked 2 goals. I think he's been shuffled out of the midfield a little bit, I'd say, with Parrish back. Have a quick look. So Parrish went in there 45%. Draper was in there obviously full. Stringer was back in there 72%, so that's really, really frustrating. Don't know why they do that. And that's why we saw the likes of Caldwell go quite poorly with a 72 with only 34% time in the mid. Same with Durham and a Shield. So the day we understand what the hell Essendon are doing with their midfield, the day we'll all be better off in terms of how do we predict who's going to be the best scorer, because they're just chopping and changing at the moment, which is very frustrating. So bit of a watch on Jai Caldwell. What's going to be happening with his role? If he's going to consistently put up these sort of 70 to 90s, I still think it's worth holding him. But if you have the flexibility, jump on someone who you think is going to go big for the remainder of the season, then I definitely don't mind being a bit more unique and just banking the cash that he has on his head. Because could definitely get a big upgrade on the other side for you and improve your team in other ways. Because that role is definitely changing with Parrish back. You're not looking at Parrish either. So, and only other unfortunate one was that Jordan Ridley, who I did sort of recommend people jump on as a defender last week. Good matchup, hit 25 points and was subbed out with, I think it was a knee concern. So bit of a unfortunate one there for those that did trade him in or that already had him. He was having quite a decent run at it, so very unfortunate there. But we'll keep moving on. So we've got Melbourne and GWS. Not too many fantasy relevant players here. So Oliver scored a ton. Nothing too amazing. I guess it's just one watching for next year to see if he's going to, be a better player that we sort of expect him to be. Trent Rivers, I guess he's only really fantasy relevant for me, but was in the midfield again. Started on fire with 52 points in the first quarter, but then got clamped by Bedford for the remainder of the game and only put up 30 or to finish off. The CBAs were there, but just not being able to convert and couldn't handle the tag as well as you'd sort of expect, I guess. 72% CBA, so definitely still a part of that big mix there. So no concerns. Just I guess it's a tougher run. We do see that still. He's got Western Bulldogs and then Port in the next 2 weeks. So not great, unfortunately. And besides that, we had Max, who returned after his injury. Only put up the 79, so definitely glad I didn't go there. Just looks very underdone, unfortunately. Just they rushed him back. That foot is definitely still concerning him. So um, hopefully he can just continue to drop his average for the remainder of the season and maybe cheat for us next year. But probably very unlikely considering he was averaging over like 120. Besides that, really no one else to really mention this game. I don't think we're really looking at these guys too much. Besides that, we had GWS, where Peatling was the top scorer. I know a few people that picked him up on the weekend because that was his second game in a row playing as a full-time midfielder, I'm pretty sure. Just with obviously those injuries that are happening. He's down at below 500k. What has he done? So he scored an 86 last week against the Suns in full game time and then scored the 133 this week. So this is just what we know he can do. I did look at trading him in earlier in the season, just hoping that he'd do these scores because we have seen these before. It's just he needs that consistency to play in this role and that game time. So I really do think he's a fantasy player. Just one I'm watching, and hopefully he can be decent for us in the future. I do unfortunately think he'd be a bit more expensive next year, averaging he's averaging 58, so won't be too expensive, but definitely probably more expensive than what he is currently priced at. Probably again, I don't know what the injury report's looking like, but we just have a quick look. I don't know how long those other boys are expected to be out for. So Canelio is a test this week, so you expect him to probably come back if he didn't play. I don't think he played. Yeah, he didn't play, so yeah, I'd expect him to be back, and probably that means he's gone instantly. Besides that, you have the likes of Josh Kelly, who's still 3 weeks away, so probably season done for him, unfortunately. So if you expect him to sort of be in there for the remainder of the season, maybe you could take a punt on it, but I do think it's a bit of a risky play at this point in time. You see he was in there, 70%, sort of the third midfielder for them. Surprisingly, Bedford's the number one midfielder for them, which is just oddly enough to say. What did Bedford even score? He scored a 81, which quietly is going okay, especially as a forward option. But I don't think I couldn't trade in the tagger, unfortunately. Enough rambling. We got Lockie Whitfield. I don't think we need to say too much about him. He's just absolutely flying at the moment. Definitely the most informed player of the competition. I think that's his sixth 120 plus in last 8 weeks. So he is absolutely just flying. Needs to be more of a captain option, honestly. Besides that, we have Tom Green with this a 105. That's his sixth ton in a row. So again, quietly just doing his business, but not really hitting too much of a ceiling score. And I guess that sort of finishes off for this game. We'll keep moving on. Fremantle got the win over the West Coast there in the Derby, or Derby, however you want to say it, depending on which state you're in. Brayshaw was a good target last week. He was my number one trade in for the midfield, and he put up a nice 115. Probably not as big as what you would want, but in that sort of matchup, you'd take 115. I think we get a little bit greedy sometimes as fantasy coaches that we always want to trade in someone that gets these 150s, these 160s, and if not 130s at a minimum. But at the end of the day, you still got to take 115s, and anything over 110 is still a very good trade in my opinion. So I'd be very happy with him, and he does still have a good run to finish off the season. So I do think he's going to be good there. His mate Calb's wrong. Partner of crime had a really good game as well. Only had the ton, so didn't quite get the same sort of scoring as Brayshaw with just not as many tackles, which is what we commonly see, right? Just he doesn't tackle as heavily as a Brayshaw does, and that's why I personally prefer Brayshaw as that bit of a bull in there. But yeah, He's taken a ton from Caleb Strong either way. Hayden Young with a 91, which is really disappointing when he was on that at 3/4 time. He actually scored a 0 point last quarter, so just parked the bus, didn't feel like he needed to get involved anymore, and yeah, really unfortunate because it would have been a nice sort of ceiling score like a 120, but it is what it is. That's just him at the moment. He just likes to park the bus sometimes. Besides that, we had Jordan Clark, who saved his score with a big 41-point last quarter to get up at 90. So, bit of a sigh of relief for those that are still owning him, like myself. Besides that, we had Luke Ryan, who put up a 63 and is absolutely one that you need to trade out if you haven't got rid of him already. He is just absolutely hurting and bleeding at the moment. But that sort of does it for Fremantle. An interesting one is that Fife has been offered a 1 week suspension. So what does that sort of do with a midfield mix for this game? Do they just bring someone in like a Johnson Matthews, I think his name, or Matthew Johnson? One of the ways you say it. He's got two fucking first names. It's hard to tell which way it goes. So Matthew Johnson. So I would expect he sort of comes in and plays that sort of fourth midfield role that Fife is currently playing. If not, we'll see probably a bit of a bump in Sarong, Brayshaw, and Young's midfield clock. So yeah, hopefully that's the case because I have at least two of them. We'll move on to West Coast, and that's it. West Coast are irrelevant. But in reality, we saw Yo go 112. Good to see him up and about. He's been going pretty decently this season. Kelly 101, nothing too amazing. Hunt back to earth with an 82 after that big ceiling last week. Harley Reid 78. That's just sort of what he's going to be like. Besides that, that's pretty much all about it. I don't think we're really looking at too many of these guys. Yeah, unfortunately, True, or however you want to say it, Zane True got injured and subbed out on 4. Very, very early on in the game at 1%. So, yeah, very unfortunate for those that did trade him in. Definitely one we maybe need to look at for the next year if he is going to come in and play that sort of midfield role. But I do think there's a few other West Coast boys that are waiting in the wings, just injured at the moment. So, yeah, we'll move on from this game. So we've got now the Pies versus Richmond. Pies got it done pretty comfortably there. We saw Nick Dacos absolutely have a flyer with 42 disposals, 6 marks, and 2 tackles. He was on track for some monster. He had 18 disposals in the first quarter and had like 49 fantasy points. So he was on track for 200 there. Did slow down quite quickly. I think he just caught a bit of attention. Yeah, and a little bit unfortunate for like myself who did trade him out last week. End of the day, I would have expected with 42 disposals to be much bigger, but he's still 128 hurts not having him. Just not getting tackles as what you'd expect, so not too bad there. But one I'd still be looking to heavily trade out. He's still got quite a tough run to finish off with quite a few tags, or expected tags anyway. If I can find his run here, he goes Carlton, so he should cop chin cotter tag. Then Sydney, so more than likely they've got many taggers, so definitely something there. Then Brisbane, who's a tough matchup, and maybe cops a Berry, even though Berry hasn't been doing a huge amount. And then finishes off with Neil Bullen, so that happened previously as well. So I think there's definitely 4 tags coming his way, and would highly recommend trading him out if you haven't already. Yeah, definitely one I'd definitely be considering. You probably can just look for 1 week if you really wanted to. I don't think Chincott is the biggest tag, but we did see the likes of Butters and Rosie both go pretty poor this week because of that tag. So definitely one to be concerned about. Besides that, on this list, really, we've got looking at Cripps, who is just a shell of himself. He's midfield self at the moment. He's just shocking and, yeah, needs to be gone. He probably last time I mentioned him for this season. He is one that just needs to go. On the flip side, at Richmond, really, I've only got Taranto highlighted, who was unfortunately subbed out on 40. So he is just getting super cheap for us. I think I've locked him into my side for next year already. Put him in the black book because he is going to be very cheap. I think he's, what is he? averaging this season? It'd be fairly low. 94%, 94 fantasy points. So he's going to be very cheap. That's at least 10, 15 points where he should be. So very easy one to lock in for us next year, I'm hoping. But in terms of this year, really not looking at anyone, unfortunately. I don't think they have the greatest run in terms of really anything. So midfield's not great. Got North this week and then Hawthorn a week later. So no one I think is going to fill those roles and really take those fantasy points from them. So bit of a irrelevant team at the moment. But we'll move on to Sydney and Western Bulldogs, which was again another big upset. Western Bulldogs got it done by nearly 40 points, which is pretty amazing. They're in some red hot form as well. We saw Matty Roberts, the boy from I don't know, our boy from early on in the season, did really well. 138. He's won back-to-back tons and had a bit of a resurgence to the back end of the season. I think he has the lowest break even. So yeah, absolutely flying at the moment. He is. I'm not looking at it. Just wanted to give him a quick shout out that he has been traveling really well, and maybe a primo option at some stage in his career if he can continue these numbers. Errol Gordon, just super consistent, 114. He's just absolutely killing it. Could have been a lot bigger because he did kick 2 behinds in that. Didn't get a huge amount of marks or tackles, but just his work rate is elite. Brody Grundy put up a nice 109 after a poor couple of weeks. Absolutely dominated English in the hit-out department with 43 hit-outs to, 21? So yeah, literally smacked him. It still put up 15 disposals, 4 marks and 6 tackles. And besides that, we had Heaney, who put up a nice 108 after having quite a few poorer weeks. Good to see that the role hasn't changed very much for him. And we saw that Luke Parker was actually the sub, so maybe that's something that's something that is just going to continue to happen. So maybe there is no concern with Heaney's role at all. So hopefully that continues. And again, besides that, we did see that Chad Warner copped a bit of attention from the likes of, who was it? I can't remember now. Someone copped a bit of attention. He just couldn't get around the ball, which resulted in him just not getting any touches. So, anyways, he's not really fantasy relevant. I just wanted to mention that. On the flip side, Treloar top scored for the Western Bulldogs with a 125. He is just a gun at the moment. He is absolutely flying. 40 disposals, 4 marks, 3 tackles. Absolutely just a fantasy gun at the moment. It looks super fit and healthy. His has been a super big miss for me this season. Been holding him all year. Just, yeah, it's been a hard one to try and get a hold of. Just always expecting the injury to happen, and the run never came because they had such a good run to start the season. That's the reason I picked Bontempelli, but yeah, picked the wrong Bulldog in the end of the day. Ed Richards put up another nice ton after that one, the big one last week. I don't think I'm really looking at it, but yeah, no real concerns. Dale put up a nice 91, English 91, so probably a bit below from what you would want from him, but was a tough matchup. And Bontempelli is probably the one that we need to talk about, who's scored up an 81. Very poor, just really didn't want to be out there by the looks of things. 22 disposals, 2 marks, and 4 tackles. So really a shell of himself. And there's no way he deserves to hit the Brownlow this year, in my opinion. He is half the football player he has been of last year, particularly. I think he was a little bit robbed there, but that's not what we're here to talk about. I don't think he's getting it this year, and I don't think he's anywhere near his best. So, yes, very unfortunate, and maybe one you could trade out, honestly. Looking at the run, it's not anything amazing. Got Melbourne this week, so that's a decent one. Adelaide the week after, so a neutral matchup, but then finished off with North and GWS. Maybe he sneaks forward and kicks a few goals in a couple of those games, particularly against Adelaide and North being lower teams. Even Melbourne's not the greatest team, so could definitely sneak forward and kick a few goals and save his stealing, but I'm not expecting a huge stealing score for him to finish off the season. And definitely could be one you could trade out. And I think that sort of does it for this game. We'll finish off with the last game where my boys Hawthorn got the win over Crows by a massive 66 points at Adelaide Oval. Not too many fantasy relevant players really here. We saw Laird go 113. He's just been quietly doing his business. Haven't seen super amount of ceiling games from him, but we know how fantasy relevant he has been, being one of the stars of the competition for a long time. Especially with Dawson out, he just took it on himself to do really well. Probably one I'm not looking at though, because we did mention a lot about their tough run. Maybe a 1 week play against Geelong, but after that, Western Bulldogs, Port, and Sydney, quite tough run. I wouldn't expect anyone to do pretty well in that. So one I'm not looking at. My boy Soligo put up a 89, 0 marks again in that game. Fucking hell. If he can put that game together, he could definitely be a fantasy scorer for us. But at this point in time, he is just a impact player. And for us, a lot of us had Dowling as well with a 72. So definitely decent, pretty nice as an F6 option if you're still rolling with him like myself. Besides that, we had Zach Taylor put up a 40. He would have made some decent cash for us. We saw Dan Curtin come in as a late in this game as well. Didn't do a huge amount because he was the sub, but it's 21 points in 25% game time isn't too shabby. One we could probably look at in future years, I reckon, because he'd still be fairly cheap. I don't think he's averaging a huge amount. Only playing a couple games as well. Get the discount. What has he played? He's played 3 games, and is averaging 21 points. So yeah, he'll be basement next year, which is nice. Probably will lock it in. I reckon he'll be one of the walk-ups next year for them. But to finish it off, Hawthorn, not too many super rare fantasy relevant players here, but we got Connor McDonald. He's quietly been going pretty well. Just when he hits the scoreboard, he absolutely flies. So definitely one we can watch if we're having struggles next year. And Dylan Moore, 98, one of the better performers for the F6 spot alongside Simpkin and Myers there. He is just super consistent, even though he didn't really hit many goals. He kicked 1 goal too. Could have been a much bigger day for him. Besides that, speaking of Day put up an 84. I don't think is anything to really be speaking of anymore. I just don't think the what's it called Hawthorn game style is fantasy inducive. So yeah, they all seem to score quite consistently around that 80, but they share it around so well that they're not having many ceiling games. So maybe it puts a line for me through the likes of Sicily and a few others for next year. So I'm not talking about next year a whole lot, like the season's already over, but that's just sort of where my mindset is at this point in time. My season's sort of done. I'm just sort of playing for matchups at the moment, and yeah, looking forward to next year. But that sort of does it for all the round review. Hopefully you enjoyed the new format. This is more of just an informational sort of video if you didn't get to watch the game, so I can cover all of them for you. Talked about a few of the trade-in options that I really like. I'll go across that again in a bit more detail in the trades mode video later along in the week. But besides that, I will see you guys later in the week. Hopefully you had a great weekend, and hopefully your team's flying and you're competing for the hat or the cars up there, whereas I'm not this year. If you have any questions, feel free to drop it below. Again, I'll be answering your questions at some stage in one of the videos. I'm still sort of working out how this new sort of format is going to work. Just as I said, bit of trial period, but we're getting there, and I'm actually quite enjoying this new format. So hopefully you guys are too. That's enough rambling for me. I'll catch you guys later on. Bye.